Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of Season 11 of the Dark Money Files, in which we shine a light into a murky world. I'm Ray Blake, and with me is my co-host, friend and business partner Graham Barrow. Hello Graham.
Hello Ray.
Graham, there's a phrase I'm hearing a lot at the moment that I didn't used to.
Oh, don't tell me, Ray. If it's not Nepo Baby or Vibe Check, it's probably Caught in 4K.
Well, it's none of those, Graham, although, like you, being down with the millennials, I've heard them all.
Oh, I shouldn't sound so surprised, should I? Sorry, Ray. So, go on, what is it then?
Proliferation financing, Graham.
It's not quite so buzzy, is it? But
No.
I think more fully, Ray, you mean financing the proliferation of chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear weapons.
Or CBRN, yeah, that's the very one.
It's not catchy, is it?
Not really.
But, if I'm right, this featured in the FCA's recently proposed update to the Financial Crime Guide for Firms.
It did, yes, but that was just a case of the guide catching up, Graham. It's actually been a regulatory requirement in the UK to address proliferation financing risks alongside money laundering and terrorist financing since 2022.
And when you say it's a legal requirement to address proliferation financing risks, what does that mean?
The newish since 2022, Regulation 18A requires that firms establish and maintain a business-wide proliferation financing risk assessment.
Like the one required for money laundering and terrorism, or terrorist, I should say, financing.
Exactly like that, Graham. Regulation 18A mirrors Regulation 18 almost exactly, so the requirement's the same, but the risk a different one. Firms are allowed to either incorporate proliferation financing into their money laundering terrorist financing assessment or maintain a standalone one in addition.
Okay, so let's say you are a UK regulated firm and you don't yet have one of these.
Well, in which case you're breaking the law, Graham.
Yeah, granted, yeah, but doesn't always mean. Let's just suppose, for the sake of a kind of a mental exercise, that you've somehow not clocked this as a new requirement and you now have to catch up.
Right.
So where would you start? I mean, in reality, is there much difference between terrorist financing and proliferation financing? Couldn't you argue, Ray, you've already got this covered in your terrorist financing risk assessment?
Not really, Graham. When you consider terrorist financing, the risk is all about who money's being paid to. Once you've established that the money is headed into terrorist hands, you're less concerned with what use it might be being put to.
Well, that's true.
But for proliferation financing, the risk isn't limited to just terrorists. Money or goods could be heading to commercial companies or even states not associated with terrorism, but where that transfer could fuel the manufacture or purchase or distribution of weapons.
Okay, so it's the use the money or goods are going to be put to that constitutes the risk.
Yeah, certainly more so than for terrorist financing.
So then isn't this already covered by your sanctions risk assessment?
Well, again, it's not a complete match. Proliferation financing exposure is not limited to people or entities or states subject to sanctions. It looks more widely than that. Also, there's no legal requirement to produce a sanctions risk assessment. It's just a strict liability.
Well, no, fair enough. So there's no argument that the absence of a proliferation financing assessment is somehow offset by other risk assessments.
I can't see one, no.
Fair enough. Where do I start then in putting an assessment together? Do the Financial Crime Guides editions help?
Not very much, Graham. They identify the responsibility to have a risk assessment for proliferation financing without going too far into what it might look like or need to cover.
So where would we direct folks then to understand the requirement?
Well, first of all, I think a review of the 2021 FATF guidance on proliferation, financing, risk assessment and mitigation would be worthwhile.
Well, certainly sounds appropriate, Ray.
Yeah, so I took one for the team and read it.
Oh, bless you. And Ray, what did you learn? Do you want to do a Graham-sized summary?
Yeah, of course. Well, the first point of note is that FATF squarely relates proliferation financing risks to targeted financial sanctions. Specifically, it talks about Iran and North Korea and sees proliferation financing risks as primarily a failure to apply targeted financial sanctions correctly.
Well, okay, I guess that is the most obvious exposure.
Indeed. It says that the risk assessment methodology can be the same as used for money laundering and terrorist financing, and that there should be focus on inherent and residual risk. Different firms with different customer types, products and so on will face different threats.
Okay, that makes sense, although it doesn't actually get us much further.
No, but what's potentially more helpful is 4 lists of risk indicators.
4 lists, right? Not 4 candles, 4 lists.
4 lists, yes. First, there's a list of risk indicators in customer profiles, as well as the obvious stuff around geographical location, ownership complexity, and so on. There are some less obvious ones, like indications that a business customer may be acting at least partially as a money service business or pay-through account, and the use of trade deals with third-party intermediaries where this is at odds with the nature of business collected at onboarding.
All right, well, that's the first list. What's the next one?
Well, then we have a list of account and transaction activity risk indicators.
And I'm guessing there again are some fairly obvious items here.
Oh yeah, but some interesting ones too, like links between representatives of companies exchanging goods that suggest their activities might be coordinated, and the use of ledger arrangements to get around the need for frequent international financial transactions.
Is that a bit like running up a bar tab, right?
Yeah, it absolutely can be, and it separates the supply of goods from the financial movement. Now that can be innocent and simply a matter of convenience, but it could be exploited to evade proliferation financing controls.
Sure, so 2 lists of risk indicators still to go.
Yeah, so the next one is maritime sector risk indicators, and those involved with that sector will be familiar with these, I guess. There's a focus on the plausibility of the arrangements in terms of the purported nature of the deals. So, for instance, if the cost of shipping is disproportionate to the declared value of the cargo, or if the goods are incompatible with the technical level of the destination country, that would need scrutiny.
Gotcha. And therefore, by my maths, there's 1 left. So what is the final list?
Yeah, absolutely. That's trade finance risk indicators. Now, this is the shortest list, although, of course, not all trade is subject to finance, and the shipping indicators will have picked off a lot of the threats here.
And I guess the focus for trade finance is inconsistencies, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Parties in the chain varying between the original letter of credit and the eventual wire instructions, for instance.
So does FATF identify specific sectors with elevated proliferation financing risks?
Yes, they do. 4, in fact. In the banking sector, in the banking sector, they highlight correspondent banking services and trade finance as particularly vulnerable lines.
And I guess they can cite specific justification for that through past cases.
Yes, they can, and they do. Outside of banking, they also single out 2 other sectors, trust and company service providers and virtual assets. Again, they highlight specific threats in these lines.
Okay, so that was a worthwhile reading assignment for you.
Yeah.
But, right, I took one for the team too, because I reviewed the UK's 2021 National Risk Assessment of Proliferation Financing.
And was it enlightening, Graham?
Well, for certain values of enlightening, yes, it was.
Good.
So, shall I run through the key points?
Please do.
Okay, so in many ways it reflects the themes of the FATF guidance, but there are some very useful UK specifics and some nice examples that illustrate both direct and indirect proliferation financing exposure, plus state actor, and I'm going to call it PF from here on in, Ray, because I think everyone knows what we're talking about, plus state actor PF activity.
Okay, so what do they mean by direct PF then?
The Treasury, which compiled the risk assessment, looks at this in two strands. Firstly, there is the direct procurement of proliferation or dual-use items, and secondly, the evasion of financial sanctions regimes.
Okay, so firstly, the supply of dangerous goods, and secondly, the provision or movement of money.
Well, that is exactly it, right?
Do you just want to touch briefly on what's meant by dual-use goods, Graham?
Yeah, of course I will. So here we're talking about goods that might have a non-weapon use, like ammonium nitrate, a substance we have past associations with. Right. Widely used as an agricultural fertiliser, but which, I don't know, I went into a West Country accent there. Widely used as an agricultural fertiliser. Yeah, let's throw that in for good measure, but which can also be used in making explosives. The paperwork may well present this as an innocuous sale, but it might be a disguise.
And most people will have access to lists of dual-use goods to watch for specifically, because not all of them are obvious.
Quite so. And in an example, the Treasury also highlights the risk of financial structures that disguise the end users of these supplies as well.
So what about the financial sanctions side of things?
Well, the National Risk Assessment has an example of a reinsurance contract that provided cover for an overseas insurer that in turn insured a vessel with links to North Korea. Only after it was insured did the vessel and its owning company become subject to sanctions.
And what happened to cause that, Graham?
Well, it turned out the vessel was involved in ship-to-ship petroleum transfers with a North Korea-flagged vessel.
Well, yeah, that will certainly do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the time the policy was taken out, there wasn't a sanctions hit. When it later came to light, the policy was cancelled. No premiums had been received, but if they had been, those funds would have had to have been frozen.
And if the reinsurance firm had missed this?
Well, in that case, the vessel's insurance would have allowed it to participate in the transport of proliferation-sensitive material. The UK reinsurer would have facilitated that by providing the policy that would have breached financial sanctions.
Okay, so that's direct PF through supply of sanctioned goods or breaching financial sanctions. So what's indirect PF about?
Well, here's where the UK view looks beyond the FATF scope, and there's a flavour of money laundering typologies here.
Oh?
Yeah, indirect PF is where there are more steps between the finance and the proliferator. Typically, that's going to mean complex structures involving front companies and or intermediaries.
So that really opens up the scope, doesn't it? It's not just trade finance and correspondent banking where there are significant exposures here, is it?
No, quite right. Wherever there is any kind of commercial business activity, there's scope for underlying PF to be concealed or facilitated. Where complex dealings are undertaken, regulated firms need to understand the legitimate economic or legal purpose of those complexities, and as far as feasible, rule out a PF angle.
Okay, so at the risk assessment level, I guess firms need to look at their products and services through that lens to assess the exposure.
Indeed, Ray. In the National Risk Assessment, there's a case study involving aircraft parts that involve front companies and legitimate businesses across a dozen jurisdictions, and another including my favourite misused entity type, a Scottish limited partnership, set up by an Eastern European actor as an intermediary for defence-related contracts and collect payments through offshore bank accounts.
No, that's my grammar, that's awful.
I should do that again.
And to collect payments through offshore bank accounts, that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should do it again. Indeed, Ray, in the National Risk Assessment, there's a case study involving aircraft parts that involves front companies and legitimate businesses across a dozen jurisdictions, and another including my favourite misused entity type, a Scottish Liberty Partnership. Can't believe it. Set up by an Eastern European actor as an intermediary for defence-related contracts and to collect payments through offshore bank accounts.
So, as you say, considerable crossover with money laundering activities.
Yes. So finally, the Treasury looks at the role of state actors, specifically North Korea and Iran. In the case of North Korea, it highlights the activities of consular staff and the trade in luxury goods, of course. For Iran, one point made is the sale of oil to certain states where the payments might touch UK firms.
Now, Graham, I'm struck by the fact that both the FATF guidance and the UK National Risk Assessment predate the war in Ukraine and the significant sanctions deployed in response to that.
You are absolutely right, Ray. Fortunately, we also have very recent guidance from RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute.
How recent, Graham?
Well, it was published on the 2nd of May 2024, Ray, so I think we can say fairly recent.
Yeah, if you're listening to this the week we put it out, you'll consider that's very recent. And the first thing in it that caught my eye is a really useful annex that lists all the proliferation-related sanctions in relation to North Korea, Iran and Russia in one table.
Yeah, it strikes me that this will be a key reference for this year's proliferation financing risk assessment. Was there anything else in the report that you wanted to highlight, Ray?
Well, I think the whole report is an essential read. It's relatively short, and it will drive many firms to review their PF risk assessments, even if they did so quite recently. But I think firms will find the way the report outlines relevant case studies and follows each with red flags and suggested mitigations is really useful.
Yes, because so far in all of this, we've looked mainly at assessing the inherent risk, and that's important, but it's not the whole story.
Indeed. To be fair, the FATF guidance devotes a whole section to this topic, but the RUSI report supplements this very nicely using Russia-specific examples.
Now, Ray, the RUSI paper is very much UK focused, but it's well aligned with guidance from the European Commission from September 2023, also looking at Russian sanctions circumvention, but with a pan-European lens.
Yeah, in particular, that European Commission paper gives some excellent EDD checklists.
OK, so that's 4 fairly crucial papers to review that will inform a sensible proliferation financing assessment. We will put links to them in the show notes for those who want to follow up in more detail.
So, what's next, Graham?
Ray, I think we've run out of things to talk about.
Really?
No, I'm only kidding. Given that we've just talked about complex structures, I thought we might do an episode which is close to my heart about, well, either the total lack of imagination or the stupidity of organised criminals when it comes to creating suspicious entities.
I'm looking forward to it.